Hello class, welcome to our lesson for today. Now let's start with our lesson objectives and then we'll jump right into what we're learning for the day. Now, our lesson objectives are our I can statements. I can realize the toll World War II had on the American people, and I can understand several ways the government responds in times of war. Now, our lesson for today is about 1940s and the event that happened during this decade. That was World War II. So before this, we've talked about the 1930s. We had the Great Depression, and then we learned about the pop culture from the 1930s. And today, we're going to jump right into the decade of the 1940s. Okay, as I mentioned before, the main event of the 1940s was World War II. Now, what we're going to do is we're not going to talk a lot about the causes of World War II or about the battles and what happened so that the Allies could win the war. And I've made this choice because of several different things. I feel like World War II is one thing that history classes talk a lot about. You're bound to have that history teacher that loves World War II and gets super into it, and World War II is so cool, and I love it as well. But I feel like this is something that you're bound to get many times again, and not just your history classes, but other classes as well in the course of your education. So what I've chosen to do is I've chosen not to talk about the things that you will hear repeated many different times in other classes, but to talk about the things that teachers don't normally teach about World War II and to tie that into our pop culture. So we're going to look at World War II from a pop culture kind of standpoint. What we're going to do today is we'll look at one of our pop cultures for World War II and the 1940s, and then in the next lesson we'll learn the other pop culture items as well, and they'll help us to understand the war effort. But these are hopefully things that will teach you things that you won't learn again in other history classes, but can also be beneficial for you and build your knowledge of World War II. Now, I do want you to kind of get a good overview of World War II. That's why our first video clip is just a very short animated overview of World War II. I think it will help you to understand a little bit about this war, but we won't go into all the terms and all the details the video talks about in this lesson because you will get that many times again. So what I want you to know and understand about World War II, though, is I want you to know that pop culture intended to help the war effort. So the government, because they're fighting a war, the government needs things from the people. It needs an attitude, and it needs actual physical stuff from its people. And so today we'll focus on how the government gets people to believe in this war effort and gets them to donate their things, because the government has to be very strategic to do this. And they use pop culture as one of the platforms to get people to buy into the war here. So that's kind of an introduction to our lesson for today. Now at this time, what I want you to do is I want you to view video clip number 1. And video clip number 1 is just that overview of World War II that I was talking to you about. It's just a couple minutes long. Go ahead and pause the video right now and view video clip number 1. Okay, so at this point, you should have already viewed video clip number 1, and you have a little brief overview of World War II, and we're ready to jump into our pop culture and how the government gets the people to buy into the idea of war. Okay, so what I have to show you on this slide is I have several different posters or advertisements for World War II that people would have seen during this time period. So just as I said, these are all during the time period, which means all these posters were created during the 1940s. And the message of the posters is the same. The government needs people to believe in the war effort, and it needs them to do certain things and think through certain things and have certain attitudes to support the war. During World War II, the U.S. was involved in what's called total war. That meant that everything that was created and produced during that time period and thought about during that time period was directed towards the war effort. Because it was such a big deal, everybody was affected by World War II. So what the government needed people to do was to donate their stuff and to support the war. And this is one way they did it. They would hang up these advertisements and posters in order to get people to support the war effort. Now, these are advertisements that people would see on billboards at the time when they were just driving down the street, or it was things that people would see like on the corner of the street as they were walking to their work and their job, or it would be things that people would see on stores. So this was like everybody was going to see these kinds of posters. So let's look at the very first one. This poster is kind of a war scene. It's got the guys fighting, and it says, "They've got the guts, back them up with more metal." So the message of this is telling you that these are brave soldiers. In order to support the soldiers at the war, the American people needed to donate metal. Obviously, this metal was going to be used to build airplanes and build tanks and build guns and ammunition. The government needed the American people to donate metal for free just because they loved America in order to be able to fight this war and to afford it. And so the message of this poster is telling you, well, if you support these courageous, brave soldiers who are doing such brave things as you see in the poster, you need to donate metal so we can support them. Now, the next poster is Uncle Sam. He obviously represents America in many different depictions, and it says, "Defend American freedom. It's everybody's job." So you have Uncle Sam is getting ready to go to war. He's put on his cap. He's ready to go. And if Uncle Sam's ready to go and you support Uncle Sam, then you need to be able to do something to help. And the next one there's a husband standing behind his wife with his hands on her shoulders, and she's got this kind of brave, happy look on her face, and she says, "I'm proud, my husband wants me to do my part." During this time period, everybody had to support America. So what started happening that was a really good thing is people that usually didn't have a voice in America, like Black people and like women and other minorities, they suddenly became important to society because all the white men left to go fight in the army, and then who was left had to contribute to the war as well. And so women were able to, instead of just be a wife and a mom and stay home, which there's nothing wrong with that, but they were able to go out in society and they were able to fight, and they were able to help the soldiers in the factories. And so they would build the tanks and they would do those kinds of jobs that they previously wouldn't be able to do because they were women. And so she's saying, "I'm proud my husband wants me to do my part. My husband supports me, and you should be like me, and you should come help with the war effort." Now in the middle here, we have another woman. She's holding these cans of food that she's canned herself. And she says, "Of course I can. I'm patriotic as can be, and ration points won't worry me." What the message here is she's talking about ration points. Ration points were what the government decided you could buy at the store. So every family was allotted a certain amount of ration points because the government was responsible for feeding so many soldiers and so many troops abroad fighting in the war that they had to limit the kind of things that were available to the public. So the government said, okay, if you have a ration point, you can trade that in for a certain good, and then you can go ahead and buy whatever you want, but it's limited to your ration points. And so the message of this poster is saying, oh, well, this woman has grown her own gardens and it has produced her own food. That way she doesn't have to worry about the ration points and it doesn't bother her and her family. So she's found a creative way to not have to suffer the loss of not having to buy whatever she can at the store because she's doing her own canning. And then this last one is my very favorite one. Sometimes it confuses students when they first see it, but go ahead and see if you can figure this one out. I'll let you read it, I'll let you think about it, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so the message says, "When you ride alone, you ride with Hitler. Join a car-sharing club today." So what does this even mean? Okay, so we see that there's a man in the car, and then there's like an invisible Hitler sitting next to him. Okay, so a car-sharing club. Another word for car-sharing would be carpooling. So when you ride alone, you ride with Hitler. So they want you to join a car-sharing club, which means that you take multiple people with you in the car. Maybe you're carpooling to work or to the store. Why would the government want them to do this? Well, the government would want them to save the metal for the cars and to save the gas. That way, if more people are carpooling and using less resources, the government can use those resources to fight in the war. Now, that message makes sense, but what I think is kind of funny about this is it's kind of a jump in logic. Like if you're not carpooling, that automatically means you support Hitler and the Nazis. Well, I think people would carpool or wouldn't carpool for many different reasons other than that they support Hitler. But this message is calling you out that if you don't do that, then you support Hitler. So it's kind of a jump in logic, but a good tactic to get people to do what you want to do because Hitler's obviously the bad guy here. Okay, we're going to jump right into our very first pop culture item for the 1940s. Our very first pop culture item for the 1940s was Captain America. So our task with this is to figure out why Captain America would have been a popular character during the 1940s. What would have appealed to people about Captain America during this time period? The first thing we'll do is get a little background into the comics, then we'll talk about the origin of Captain America, and then we'll answer that question. So the very first Captain America comic came out in March of 1941. This character was created by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. And then in March of 1941 was when the origin story of Captain America came out. And this is the very first comic book cover for Captain America and his origin story. Now, in order for you to have some context for the date March of 1941, I want you to understand that World War II started in 1939. And it's not until December of 1941, though, that America enters the war. So the war's been going on for a couple years at this point in the world, but America hasn't yet chosen to enter the war at this point. But they've been hearing the news and they've been hearing all about the war and they know about it and they know what's happening, but they haven't yet made the choice to enter the war. So here is kind of a fun fact about the first comic book. In the first comic, there was an advertisement for a club that kids could join if they bought the comic book. And the club was called the Sentinels of Liberty Club. And what you did is you mailed into the company one dime, and then what they would do is they would mail you back a metal badge and a membership card. And the metal badge would say Sentinels of Liberty Club, and you could wear that and it would be really cool. And then the membership card would say, now you're a member of the Sentinels of Liberty, just like Captain America, and it was this cool thing that all the kids wanted. Well, Captain America was so popular at this time, and everybody wanted to be a part of this Sentinels of Liberty Club, that they actually had to stop sending out the metal badges because of the wartime rationing. So just like we talked about in the poster in the previous slide, how the government needed you to donate your medal, well, because of the rationing of the medal and the government needing it, the company couldn't even give the metal badges anymore because so many kids thought that this guy was so cool and wanted to be part of the club. Okay, and then by December of 1941, Captain America becomes these publishers' #1 seller. So he's become really popular in the months since he was created in that year 1941. And of course, just like I told you, December is when America decides to enter the war. So now we know a little bit of the background of the comic, and let's jump into the background of the character. Maybe you've seen the first Captain America movie, and maybe you haven't, or maybe you've just seen the Avengers, but that doesn't matter if you have or haven't seen it. We're going to give you the background. Now, Captain America starts out as this kind of really scrawny looking kid. He's from Brooklyn, and he really wants to fight in the war. But he can't fight in the war because he's too small. So here you see the before and the after pictures. When he starts out, he looks like this before picture. He's this small, scrawny kid. He's not tall enough to enter the war. He's not big enough because obviously the government wants really fit people to be soldiers so that they can handle the physical exertion that wartime is going to take on your body. But he was too short and he was too small. He couldn't join the war. And so then what he decided to do was he decided to try out for this government program where they were looking for people who would volunteer to take a special shot. And the shot would make you big and strong. And he was saying, oh, if I do this, then I'll be able to fight in the war just like my best friends and just like so many people are dying for the war, and I can be able to do this. So then when you see this after picture here, that's after he's taken the shot and he's become this super soldier who not only is really tall and has lots of muscles, but he also is really strong, stronger than regular people because of this serum. And so then he has some adventures and he fights in the war, and that's kind of the plot of the first movie. But basically what you need to know is that Captain America starts out as this really scrawny kid, and he can't fight in the war because he can't enlist because he's too small, but then he tries out for the government program and they accept him and they give him the serum to make him into Captain America. Now what I want you to do is I want you to view video clip #2, but let me tell you a little bit about what you're going to be seeing. You're going to see Captain America, and you're going to see him before he's taken the serum, and you're going to see the kind of person that he is. And what you're going to see is he and his best friend named Bucky, they're on a double date, and they go to this World's Fair. And you're going to see he leaves his best friend, and he goes to an enlistment building where you can sign up to be a soldier, and he's going to go through the exhibit and his best friend's going to come. And I want you particularly to pay attention to that part, because in that part he's going to talk about what his feelings are, and I want you to think about, why would this character have appealed to people in the 1940s? Okay, so go ahead and pause this video, and I want you to view video clip number 2. Okay, so at this point, you should have viewed video clip number 2. Okay, did you see the part where Captain America, and his name is Steve Rogers, but did you see the part where he's so sad he can't fight, and he's saying people are dying, and Bucky is a soldier, and so he sees his best friend go to war, but he can't. And so I asked you why you think that this character would appeal to people. And obviously, they love his patriotism. He loves America, and he wants to do the right thing, which is fight for his country and become a soldier. So obviously, everybody's going to like this message of someone that's really, really patriotic and wants to sacrifice and wants to be selfless and wants to fight in the war. This obviously is a message that's going to appeal to people, because everybody at this time knew someone who was fighting or someone who had died in World War II. And people are going to have really tender feelings and really strong feelings about America and about patriotism and about America winning the battle. So they love that there's this character that stands for America and is an awesome guy and is very patriotic. It stirs their own patriotic feelings. Okay, so now we're going to transition to talking about one more thing the government does in order to get people to support the war. So there's all these characters coming out like Captain America that specifically is a soldier to point people towards the war. There's all these advertisements people are seeing, but there's another form of advertisement that the government did to try to get people to support the war in a specific way. Now what I want you to do is I want you to view video clip number 3, but first let me tell you about it. In video clip number 3, you're going to see Captain America after he becomes Captain America, so he's big, strong, and muscly, and you're going to see his very first job. And this very first job that he does is something that the government hired people to do. And I want you to watch this clip, and I want you to then to think about, what is his job? What is he trying to do? He's trying to get people to do a certain thing, and I want you to listen to what you're seeing, and there's going to be a song. Listen to the words of the song and what Captain America is saying, because he's going to tell you that thing that the government wanted people to do, and then we'll talk about it. So right now, go ahead and pause this video and view video clip number 3. Okay, so at this point, you should have viewed video clip number 3. And in video clip number 3, you saw Captain America singing and dancing and part of this whole production. Did you get what he was trying to get people to do? So he was punching Hitler and saying Hitler's bad, America's great, but there was a message, and that message was to buy war bonds. So Captain America was selling what's called a war bond. Now, this was something really important that the government had to get people to do at that time period, because wars are very, very expensive, and the government alone doesn't have the money in order to buy all the stuff it needs and to support the war effort. So the government has to raise money and get people to donate so they can fight a war. Wars are that expensive. The government can't do it by themselves. They've got to get some people to chip in. So what they would do is they would hire celebrities to tell you to buy war bonds. So let's talk first about what a war bond is. Now, if you look at this poster on the right-hand side, it says, Cap salutes you for buying war bonds. See your local post office. So if you wanted to buy a war bond, here's how this would happen. You would go to your post office and you'd say, I'd like to buy a war bond. And a war bond is basically that you're giving your money to the government and you're loaning it to them. And the government will take your money and will tell you, thank you so much for your money, and we're going to pay you back what you paid us as a loan, but you're going to get some interest on top of it. So let's say that you go and buy a $5 war bond. What would happen is the government would take that $5 and they'd say, okay, here's your paper that says I bought a $5 war bond, and we're going to pay you back that war bond in 5 years time, or we're going to pay you back in 1 year's time, or when the war's over. It just kind of depended. So they would say, okay, let's say this bond is in 5 years, we'll pay you back that $5 plus $2 more. So really, you're making money because you're loaning the government your money, and that's kind of how loans work. And we talked about that with the Great Depression and banks and loans for the 1930s. So it's that same kind of loan kind of thing where you get money because you're paying the interest, right? But then this is how the government can afford to fight their war, because they're raising all this money from their people on the promise that they'll pay back even more when the time comes for that American to cash in their war bond. So let's say you went to your post office, you bought that $5 war bond. Then what you would do is you would go back in in 5 years, and you would say, okay, well, I want to cash in my war bond, and it's been five years, which is what the promise was, and I want $7 now because I paid the government $5 5 years ago. And the post office would say, okay, well, here's your money. And so that's how war bonds worked. The government needed money to fight its war, so it had loans from the American people to do this. Now, just like you saw Captain America going around the whole nation doing this performance, the government would hire celebrities to do this. So it would be like famous singers and famous comedians and famous actors, and anyone that was famous at that time period. The government would hire them to go around the country and say, hey, can you buy stuff? And I mean, this is a classic thing in advertisement today. When the Sprite people wanted to sell Sprite cranberry, they hired LeBron James to do that, and so he's in the commercials. And if LeBron tells you, do you want a Sprite cranberry, then obviously people are going to be like, well, yeah, LeBron asked me if I did, and I do because LeBron is cool. Or Justin Bieber, or Tom Cruise, or anybody that's popular. Companies can hire them in order to sell their products. So the government would hire these celebrities to sell the war to the people. So what I have for you is I have a video I want you to see, where I want you to see how celebrities at that time period were traveling the country. This is kind of like a news report that you're going to be watching. But first, I have one more detail I want to tell you before we view that. And the detail is this. Selling these war bonds during World War II was the greatest volume of advertising in U.S. history. That means more money and more time and more people and more everything went into selling these advertisements for the war bonds than any other product in U.S. history. That is a lot of money and a lot of effort going into this one thing. That's how popular and how much advertising there was for these war bonds. Okay, so now I want you to view video clip number 4. And video clip number 4 is the clip I was telling you, where the celebrities are going to be traveling the nation selling the war bonds. So it's going to be in black and white, and you'll hear a reporter reporting about the celebrities visiting all around. Now, it won't be really people that you're familiar with, because it would have been celebrities at that time period and that day in the 1940s. But when it says a name, just know that was a famous person. So go ahead at this point, pause this video and go and view video clip number 4. Okay, so just like you saw in the Captain America clip, and obviously Captain America is not a real person, so that didn't really happen, but just like you saw him selling the war bonds, that's what you saw in this clip, the real celebrities selling the war bonds. So that was a pretty cool thing for you to see. Okay, to this point in our lesson, what we've learned is how the government can afford to fight a war. Wars are expensive, so how do they get people to support the war and also to donate their stuff? Well, we talked about how they hang advertisement posters around town that cause you to sympathize with the war effort and to donate metal and other supplies. We talked about ration points, and we talked about how the government hired celebrities to go around the country and to sell war bonds to get people to raise money for the war effort. We also talked about how there was an actual comic book character, Captain America, who came out at this time to inspire people to support the war effort and inspire patriotism within them. And now what we're going to do is we're going to look at some posters that have actual pop culture items that you know about and that you will recognize that have the same and kind of similar messages to what we saw before. Now comes the point in our lesson where we're going to have an assignment. Your assignment for the 1940s is to pick 3 of the advertisement posters that we're going to go through. You need to describe the poster and then explain the meaning behind the poster. I have these linked on Canvas as well. If you need to look at them for more time than the rest of this video, then you can go click on that link and it'll give you the instructions and it'll have all the posters that you can see one more time if you need to. But for the rest of this video, I'm just going to go through the posters with you and then explain to you what your assignment is. So when we talk about describing the poster, here are some possible questions you can answer when you describe the poster. Because here's the thing, I need to know which poster you're talking about, and I need to know that you've looked at it and you've tried to understand what you're seeing. So when you're looking at describing the poster, you could answer, well, what is pictured? What's happening in the poster? Then explaining the meaning behind the poster is where I want you to tell me why that poster looks that way. Here are some possible questions you can answer. And remember, when it says possible questions to answer, you don't need to answer every single one of them. These are just things that you could answer in order to receive full credit for this assignment. So what you could answer to explain the meaning of the poster, you could say, why would the words say that? What message do they send? You could look at the picture and you could think about why the picture would show that particular scene. You could think about what someone would think or feel when they're viewing that advertisement. So in the 1940s, if you were wandering the streets and saw that, what does the creator of that advertisement want you to think and to feel when you see it? Then, why do you think the creator would make those particular choices when designing the advertisement? So you could answer some of these questions when you do that. Now, in order to receive full credit, again, what you need to do is pick 3 of the advertisement posters we're about to go through. You need to describe what's happening in the poster, and then you need to explain the meaning behind the poster. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into the advertisements. Okay, here's one. It says, I gave a man. Will you give at least 10% of your pay in war bonds? Then we have the next one. Care is costly. Buy war bonds and stamps. Now, just so that you know, a stamp is what you could buy if you didn't have enough money to buy a war bond, because $5 in that time period is going to be a lot of money. And if you're someone that doesn't have a lot of money, but you still want to support that war effort, you could buy a stamp. And a stamp would be something like 10 cents or 5 cents. And anybody could afford that. And there'd be all these advertisements about, oh, if you can't buy a war bond, buy a war stamp and you're still patriotic. And so that's why you're seeing the word stamp here. Okay, here's another one. This is Captain America, obviously. It says red 10, white 4, blue 17. Hit Hitler, hike. Be an all-winner, buy war bonds. Okay, then here's our next poster. Merry Melodies, Looney Tunes comics. And we have Bugs Bunny, obviously. Buy another war bond. Okay, Superman, let's all fight. Buy war bonds. Batman, keep the American eagle flying, buy war bonds and stamps. This one is my favorite one, I have to say. It's kind of a crazy scene here. Okay, let's blast them. Japan Nazis. This is Popeye. Buy war stamps here now. A 25-cent war stamp buys 12 bullets. Then we have the very last one, World's Finest Comics, 96 pages, sink the Japan Nazis with bonds and stamps, and you have Batman and Robin and Superman handing out war bonds and stamps. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to choose 3 of these posters that we just went through, and then you're going to describe what's in the poster, and you're going to explain the meaning of the poster. When you're done, submit this on Canvas, and I will give you credit.